G'day YouTube,
Wobbles on a lot here.
just about to test out a little bit of modern contemporary cobbling. You see, it isn't that I haven't got new boots, but one of the principles of physics and time is that the longer it is before you start using your new boots, the longer they stay new. So if you can manage to delay the day when you start walking around in your new boots, it'll delay the day that they wear out, you see. Now, when I was a kid, I was pretty rough on boots, and the old man has repaired that one and fitted it out with a new sole. Which has lasted better in the other one. And then, after I'd outgrown them, he's filled them up with plaster of Paris and painted them gold and stuck them on the mantelpiece, which makes them kind of difficult to throw away. Regardless of how bloody useless they are, they're fairly functional as ornaments. So, for quite a while, I've been meaning to repair the soles on these because the layer of polyurethane failed, partly because these boots had been several times put too close to the little pot belly while I was falling asleep half drunk in the evenings, and they were replaced by these ones, and they actually were wearing out the leather, but the soles weren't too bad. And then finally eventually they wore holes in the soles, and this one wore out more than this one because that's the one with the dud ankle, and therefore when this ankle fails, that's the toe that gets dropped in the dirt, but the sole on this one does more work. It's all kind of complicated. Anyway, I had the plan that I would use a modern preparation to do what the old man used to do with his little basket of shoe fixing tools. And yeah, you could buy kits. And he had his leather and all the rest of it there. Right, so I've got all the stuff, but I don't know that I really want to test this 1960s vintage resoling compound. But it's good to know that one has got a little piece of neo light when one wants it. Ready to hand, so to speak. And you've got to know where such things live. Otherwise you might never find them when you want them. And now I've kind of got to admit here that being who I am means being a bit of a procrastinator and putting stuff off for a while, because when these became the brand new boots that I was wearing every day, when these went out of service, I did purchase a contemporary new shiny U-Butte improved version of the vintage preparation that I've got up there in the basket. And believe it or not, though I'd bought the stuff, I was a bit worried and I didn't about whether it would work or not, and I didn't actually have any acetone, which is specified in the instructions, and I never quite got around to purchasing the acetone, so therefore I never got around to repairing that pair of boots. And when this pair got bad enough to demand that they become repaired, I reached for my packet of sole grip, then I discovered that it had gone off in the tube and become a solid gelatinous block, sort of like ballistic gelatine. So I thought, it's cool, I'll just wear these old ones for a day or two while I wait for the soles on these to cure after I buy a new tube of the stuff for $20. with its accompanying $11.80 for a litre of acetone. And funny thing, I could have bought half a litre, but it was in a tin can, and the half a litre cost $11.50. So 30 cents got me the extra 500 mils by buying it in a 1 litre plastic bottle. Anyway, out of that, probably used maybe 100 mils, perhaps. And 3 days ago, I applied the solution, and 2 days ago, I gave it a second coat, and they've now been resting and curing and doing whatever it is that the contemporary goop does. This is where it had come apart, and my theory was to just repair the defects in the urethane anywhere that this black compression loading synthetic rubber was exposed. And I had the idea that I could walk on it for a couple of days because I'd been walking on that bit there. Oh, I'd been walking on that for months before I put these boots aside. However, it turned out that once they've been left in the corner for 5 years, yeah, that rubber decomposes if it's in contact with the air. So, don't delay, do it today. I should have repaired those 5 years ago because, you know, they weren't too bad if I hadn't melted them in front of the fire. So what I propose to do now is put these things on and get about my afternoon's activities, and we'll have a little bit of a look and see how the modern preparation copes with life on the endangered species sanctuary on a rainy day. So the camera now goes on pause while I listen to the 1 o'clock news in Australia today. And this monument to procrastination goes into the wheelie bin, consigned to landfill, with probably, perhaps, possibly a couple of years of unused life in them, because some lazy bastard did not get around to it. Anyway, the new mongrels can go back into storage, and these can get into those. And we shall see what we shall see.
The unemployment rate is expected to recover to pre-COVID levels in around 4 years. I repeat, the unemployment rate is expected to recover to pre-COVID levels in around 4 years. This compares to around 6 years for the 1980s
She wants it thrown to her.
and 10 years for the 1990s recession.
Be it noted for the record that this morning, a university somewhere, I don't know whether it was Queensland or Armidale or Sydney, announced research admitting that kangaroos, they haven't done it with swamp wallabies yet, kangaroos are capable of communicating with humans using gaze alternation, just like you just saw that swamp wallaby do. Doing a sort of a reverse head nod, tossing her nose up into the sky to indicate, throw it to me, throw it to me. Just sort of couldn't resist that. Well, the soles haven't fallen off yet. And the same thing applies when it comes to debt levels. Net debt as a percentage of gave the residents at the North Melbourne and Flemington. Okay. Despite the blue sky, they say we're going to get more rain. We just had a passing shower. There's 53 centimetres of water in there at 80 litres to the centimetre. So a bit over 4,300 litres. Over here we have 60 centimetres, so there's 4,800 litres there. If it rains any more than 20 millimetres, there's not enough room in that buoy wall to accept the water, and I don't like wasting water, having paid $20 a tonne for 60 tonnes of the stuff. Easy enough to siphon water from number 1 tank to number 2 tank, But I have discovered that really it takes a pump to blow the air out of the Aquarius pipeline and allow the buoy walls to siphon into the dam at the end of about 480 metres of 32mm pipe. So we have to bring the delivery pipe over to have a talk to the pump through the appropriate endless hose, which was got for free at the dump because somebody had clearly driven over the top of it. And it works, Kimasabi, but it does squirt leaks. And I'm getting a bit sick of it. I think I might have to shout myself a new bit of hose to go between these very expensive Storch connectors. Yeah, the black poly pipe's not particularly hot in the sun because the sun's mostly on the other side of the clouds. So it'll be interesting to see whether this sucks or blows. It blew, meaning that between here and the bubble trap in the next gully, all that pipe has been in positive pressure caused by the heat of the sun on the trapped air bubble. And that brings me to a point I've recently discovered, since I took to using the pump to pressurise the line. If I close that cock and put the cap on up here while the line is full of water, eventually you get some air bubbles coming up from the bottom. Not quite sure how it goes, but I'll wager between the two bubble traps, the weight of the water trying to fall down the hill puts the pipeline space in the air bubble under fairly extreme negative pressure. And when you get a day that's hot enough for the sun to heat the air and the water basically evacuates the compartment, outside pressure is enough to collapse that polypipe in on itself in at least 3 locations between here and the dam. So I discovered. Therefore, now my new procedure is to not only leave the bottom end open so water can go downhill anytime I need to send it downhill, I also leave the top end open after I finish putting water down the hill to allow the whole thing to sort of come to an equilibrium. And ideally that means that there won't be enough water in the pipeline to be able to generate sufficient low pressure inside the pipe to be able to pull the bloody polypipe together and have it collapse itself, because that's not good for it. And there's about $1,000 worth of pipe between here and the dam. So how's that for a sidetrack? 8 minutes or so. And the sole has not fallen off of the boots yet. So with the siphons capped, we transfer the depth gauge from number 1 buoy wall to the number 2 buoy wall, as promised, 60.5 centimetres at 80 litres to the centimetre. Check and see the suction pipe has got water in it. There we go. If it was a hot sunny day, the water in the hose reel line would have been heated up and expanded and pressurised, and the water would have squirted out of there when I undid that inspection panel. Call it an inspection plug. Fuel on, choke on, ignition on. Fuel exists, sufficient unto the purpose, but it does pretty much deserve being refilled soon. Oil exists on the dipping of the stick. It could do with more, but there's enough, once again, for the sufficiency of the purpose. I'll refill it with oil. I might even change its oil when I refill the fueling of the tank. First pull. When you get good Chinesium, it's very good. Okay. It would be fun to walk down there and have a bit of a look and see how fast it's coming out. But I really only want to put 1 tonne of water down. And it's already sucked 40 litres out since the engine started. And if I walk down there for 7 minutes and walk back and take 10 minutes doing that, I'm pretty sure I'll put more than a tonne down the hill. So there is that. And there is that as well, a fresh cup of coffee. Now here's the funny thing. The spring under the hut has opened up a couple of times in the last couple of days. So there's an exercise in calibration and proof of concept. Oops. The highest this has gone so far is 5.5 old-fashioned inches. There. So it has got to 5.5. Normally my theory is it's got to get to 6 inches before the driveway becomes a mud pie. But at 5 inches, that gauge never gets emptied. It just evaporates and it fills in the rain. At 5 inches, the spring under the hut commences to flow. And it's microclimatic weather interactions like that which cause somebody like myself to occasionally have need to walk around in wet conditions. So far so good. 5 centimetres. 5/8 is 40, so 400 litres in 3 minutes. Not a bad little system, eh? And that's only running at about 1/3 throttle. Coffee time.
Jess Scully is the executive board there at City.
Arr. (49.5 centimetres), down from 60. So 12 centimetres would be 960 litres, which is about where it's at. I think I'll probably go down to 45 centimetres. So we're pulling 1300, 1400 litres out of this, putting it in the dam. And then, having lowered the water level, we'll be able to siphon water out of here to make room for whatever's going to come down the pipeline from the roof of the hut. Not rocket science, it's just convincing water to run down the bloody hill. Applied gravitation, you might say.
The Australian lawn, that's central to our thoughts as well. A new exhibition of the lawns and the fools that cut them.
Good afternoon, health authorities believe.
Slightly overshot the mark, not a great problem. I'll show you what happens when you let the column of water going downhill suck on that pipe. Just completely sucked it in. Now, if we had a couple of 100 metres of air in there, then you could wind up feasibly by the air expanding during the day and pushing the water out from the bottom end, and then during the night as the air contracts, the low pressure zone inside the pipe attempts to suck water uphill from the dam. And then the next day it gets hot again from the top end and it blows water out. Meanwhile, from the top end, you've got whatever water is between here and the low points trickling down the hill every day until what you wind up with is a really, really long air bubble up here, which during the day it pushes and during the night it sucks. And when it sucks, that's how you wind up having flat inverted spots in your poly pipe. Isn't that right? Hey, little Mr. King Parrot? Yeah. It's interesting, isn't it? Oh, you're rubbing that. That's your tree, is it? Yes, yes. You're welcome. Oh, okay, so we're not quite ready to be approached. But being observed up close is fine. Okay, so while I've been talking to the king parrot, the water has continued to siphon straight through the pump at this end, straight through the pump at the other end. So we shut that one off, and then we shut that one off. And we can open that up. Take off the transfer pipe. And my protocol now is to undo that. Hear that? What that is the resonance of the air entering the enclosed chamber as the water falls down the hill. And as the chamber gets longer and longer and longer, the tone deepens. As I said, it's not rocket science, it's only plumbing. So I'm just going to leave that, let it equalise, and then it'll be ready for next time, and I won't run the risk of putting splits in the poly pipe caused by the suction of the water falling down the hill and then being replaced by air in a bubble, and then getting such a big column of water trying to get dragged back into such a small air bubble that it just busts the pipe. It's not rocket science, it's merely plumbing. I don't know whether you can see the outflow being visualised in the detritus being sucked into the flow by Coanda effect. Well, we can double that. So we can. It's a pretty good trick, isn't it? What you wind up with is 600 litres more in here than there is in here when the two water levels are equal. There's always 600 litres more because some not quite as silly as they look type of a hillbilly actually staggered the height of those two. Not so much for this one. In that case, I built the pad up quite a concert going on there, isn't it? Yeah, I dug down to get the lowest point I could and then basically built the pad up. It means that I cannot gravity feed this 6,000 litre prism frame tank. Such is life, as they say in the classics. You can't have everything. Maybe not a perfect system, but it does work pretty well. The inflow spiralling in is strong enough to have got that entire pond swirling. Rustic agricultural, perhaps a bit shabby around the edges, but it works, Kimosabi, it works. Nothing annoys me more than seeing solar panels not actually pointed to the sun, which is probably a funny sort of excuse for perfectionism. For somebody who lives in a mansion like this. But I don't know. It all seems to make sense from where I sit.
That broader notion of defensive architecture.
Listening to the radio, drinking coffee.
That need for some sort of barrier, and yet the sheepish
and contemplating going for a walk down to the dam to see how full it actually is, which would be a very nice 1 kilometre bushwalk, half of it downhill, half of it uphill.
Right, and it's the question of someone throwing a punch. So that
with which to test this stuff out,
which is a nice
which is otherwise doing pretty well. Okay, well, it's pretty sunny here at the moment, but not necessarily so sunny to the west. Generally, that's where the weather comes from. So I might need a hat that I don't care about if it gets wet, and I might need a raincoat. And we'll go and see how this silly sole grip copes with walking on a rock block. As you can see, I've got a little bit of work to do with the chainsaw because we've had wind after we've had rain, which makes the ground go soft. And here we see a bit of forethought. That's absolute raw good luck that the falling tree didn't kill the pipeline. This one, on the other hand, I deliberately located the pipeline on the side away from where I thought the tree was likely to fall. And that worked. Guess which way I think that big tree is going to fall, eh? So we got sharp rocks, we got abrasion, we got sticks, we got moisture. That's probably a pretty good test for a proprietary chemical footwear replacement compound. Now this is the water trap. The dam is that away. The hut and the tanks is that away. So this bit down here, it's always got water in it. That forms a lock at the top end. And if you close off the airlock on the top end, when that air heats up, it blows the water in this low-lying pipe up this little bit of a hill. Once it gets up to the top of this little rise, up about there, just on the other side of that big tree. Once you pump the water out of that hollow up here, then you've just got this enormously great big long air bubble. So this hasn't got any water in it, specifically because it's open at both ends. This is where the whippersnipper dual string bobbin got its work out. Empty at 150 metres, straight line from the hut. Yeah, look at the sky. Pretty good test of a brush cutter, really. I have seen this bit of pipe here sucked flat. Now that's a little tree that's fallen down over the top of my pipeline. I've seen that bend sucked flat. And this line here, it's all empty. Yeah, I reckon I did 1,000 square metres in 1 hour of cutting and 10 minutes of string changing. "300 metres from the buoy wall." That has a bit of water in it. this is empty. So the water that I felt back there is only in that little depression. Interesting to know. Now here's a well-mannered tree. When I say pretty, please, Creator, don't drop any trees on me water storage or me power storage or me collection systems. That happened while I was between here and the dam with the whippersnipper. That tree was not lying down when I came down the hill. So I guess, as the saying goes, not much point having a God theory unless it works every day and in real time. Snicker, snicker, snark. Here we have water in the pipe. Somewhere along there, the water level happens. Suppose it might be interesting to discover where, and on the way back, I'll do something about it, rather than backtrack just now. Tea tree, cleared with a brush cutter. Yeah, full of water. Here we see more judicious use of a circuitous routing in order to try and maximise the chances of the tree not ever actually falling onto the pipeline, unless you get a really strong wind blowing the wrong way. And this has a bit of water in it, but not much. There's the high point there, and that's just a little bit lower. And along here, it's draining down the hill. Empty. Empty. $450 metres, empty. Full. 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 Empty. My guess, Kimosabi, is that the water level corresponds with that in the pump housing. Interesting to know. Absolutely predictable when you think about it, looking at it in retrospect. Kind of what I expected. And as it were foretold within the prophecy, the rain is starting to sprinkle the dam. And the overflow channel has not yet commenced to run off. But it's not far away. A view downstream from the dam wall. Last time I was down here, several days ago, the water level was at the base of those nutbush plants, which ring what is normally the high water mark. And before we got the 100 mils of rain about a fortnight ago, the pump was down level with the bottom of those nutgrass plants or onion grass plants. If I hadn't have shifted it, it would be underwater right now. So I feel pretty clever. Still having a functional pump and having now put about 6.5, maybe, yeah, 6.5 tonnes of water back down the hill to replace the 5.5 tonnes that I pulled up and put out through the fire suppression sprinklers on the 1st of December, because that's how 1st December, 1st November. Yeah, that's how dry and dusty things were getting. So almost got the 100,000 gallon dam full. Yeah, look at that. First sign of failure. Yeah. Minor fragment coming off. A bit of abrasion down there. Bit of abrasion there. Half a kilometre in pretty trying conditions. This is the boot that had the worst damage. This boot isn't bad. And that attempt to fill a defect seems to have worked moderately well. Also, if an hour and a half causes the first damage to the repair, I don't know. Might only get a week or two out of the repair, and at $20 per tube of that stuff, I don't know whether it's entirely worthwhile. But you've got to try, eh? Otherwise you don't know shit from biscuits. But anyway, at the moment, that black line coming out of the pump, going parallel to the blue line, which is the suction inlet, that black line is coming off a Stewart's connector on top of the pump casing, and the thick black line going out to the left, that's what goes up the hill. And as we discussed, there's water in that line from a vertical level equivalent to pretty much the top of that little hut there. Certainly level with the height on the connector on the delivery line. So during the day, the pipe gets hot, the air in the pipe gets hot, the hot air expands, and the hot air in the pipe going up the hill pushes that water out, and it pushes it into the dam, and it's an underwater seal drainage. So the water can come out, but air can't get back in there. During the night, everything cools down. Black radiates its heat directly out to the sky above. The air in the pipe cools and it contracts, and you develop this negative pressure, which has to be filled by water trying to go up the hill. Trouble is, 33 feet, which is like 10, 11 metres, that's 1 atmosphere of pressure. And the height between here and the buoy walls is 11 metres. So yeah, it's not going to put up with having a full vacuum on that poly pipe during the day with an underwater seal drain. That means the vacuum can't pull the water all the way up to the top. Round about the halfway mark, you wind up with a really low pressure zone, air equivalent to probably the top of Mount Everest or something, but it's very hot air. So it melts the plastic loses its strength, and the atmospheric air squashes the plastic flat. So polypipe wasn't designed to put up with diurnal temperature variations from solar heating and atmospheric pressure differentials, and therefore during the day a vacuum while it's hot. Thus and because you pretty much got to leave the top end of the pipe open for every couple of days. Go and check it. My theory is I let it fill up during the night, and then during the day the air inside the pipe becomes high pressure, and that pressurizes the plastic and keeps it round, because it's good at containing pressure, it's just not good at containing negative pressure. There's more to owning a pump than I ever dreamed back before I bought one, and now I've got 3 of the bloody things, which is more fun than not having any. And for 28 years I had this dam sitting here, and all it ever did was water the wildlife. Quite an altruistic style of a move on my part, but you know, now I'm a typically selfish industrial human, fossil fuel, and I'm using some of the water in the dam occasionally. But I do try to replace it. Like I said, this year I've pulled 5.5 tonnes out and I've put 6.5 tonnes in. So for an Australian, not actually too bad, you know. Certainly not the environmental scumbag of the year. Use it up, repair it, make it do, save it, recycle it, use it again. Because everything you don't throw away means one more thing that doesn't have to be made to replace it, which means less of a burden on the planet for resources and energy, and less pollution burden inflicted on the biosphere. So it's a thing to think about, and it's not even wrong. Might be going to get a wet ass soon. Thought we might be going to be in for a bit of a bird song concert there for a while. More on the topic of reparo rather than replace-o. There's an indicator of how bad the drought was. A whole lot of little trees died of thirst right beside the downstream area of the dam wall. There are trees growing out of the dam wall that lost their leaves to thirst. Apparently, that's how far down the water level was. Scary stuff. There's more over there. I really would have thought there was enough water or moisture subterranean downhill from the dam that those trees would have been able, or little saplings would have been able to reach it. But apparently not. Although that one there, fair in the middle of the screen, it's lost leaves at the bottom and it's got fresh green shoots up at the top. So it hasn't died because the roots feeding the top are the roots that go the deepest down into the ground, which is closest to the water. It's the roots in the surface layers of the soil which feed the leaves that are only sort of halfway up the trunk, I think. Nobody ever told me that, but it sort of kind of stands to reason, you know, when you've got a tiny weeny little seedling, your tiny weeny little seedling puts out lateral roots, and those lateral roots feed the leaf structure at that level of the plant that exists. As the plant grows higher, the roots which support the higher branches and leaves, those roots go further down. So the top of the plant should have the best connection to the water, and it's the stuff that's close to ground level that has a problem. So I deduce. I may be wrong, but I don't think so. And yeah, now it's proper fella raining. Bugger. Guess who just got the bloody camera out of sync? God knows how long that was stuffed up. Hopefully only a few seconds. I shall keep going with the video, and unless it's a truly, absolutely tragic balls up that, you know, eliminates minutes at a time, I'll leave things as they stand, and you can just have to put up with it in the middle of the video. Found a grub. Don't know whether you ever read a book called Dune by Frank Herbert. In there's a fellow called the planetary ecologist. And what he says is that the prime function of ecology is that the more life occupies a space, the more life can occupy the space, because each species creates macro niches for at least 3 other species, sometimes 5 or 7 or 10 or however many it is. But the more life occupies a space, the more life can occupy the space. And the secret is biodiversity, to maintain the biomass. And the trees need the birds to police the leaf-eating grubs and insects that would otherwise denude everything with leaf abscission. Now here you've got, there's a yellow-tailed black cockatoo who's been feeding on the witchetty grub that lived in that branch. Things you see when you haven't got a gun. Because if you had a gun, little fellas like that would not feel comfortable in coming and saying good day. But yeah, I was looking up there, trying to figure out just where the branch at my feet came from. And while I'm sitting there with my head in this position, a couple of drops of white bird shit came down, accompanied by that little bird, which came down and recovered before it got to the ground there above the pipe, and then perched in the bush, which is about when I woke up to myself and pushed the record button. Yellow-tailed black cockatoo. You would never ever want to be bitten by one of them, because they'll take off a finger or a thumb in one simple snick. And if they really wanted to, they could probably take your bloody arm off at the shoulder too. I don't know what lives in there. Probably some kind of a spider, because it has a silky sort of a look to it. Yeah, here's another band of trees that sort of almost made it through the drought. Don't know whether that's going to come good. One of these two looks in better shape than the other. The yellow box in the foreground is better than the stringy bark behind it. And strangely enough, this is a yellow box as well. Yellow box better tolerates the drought, perhaps. Kind of difficult to know exactly precisely what is real, because everybody only lives one lifetime, and whatever you grow up with seeing around you in the first 3.5 to 7 years, that's where your mind pegs normal as being at. So you can grow up in the 1960s and think that's normal, and look around today and be absolutely shocked and horrified when you only see 5 ibis or 5 pelicans flying together as one little family group, you know, trying not to be dead. Because back then, 50, 60 years ago, you could see 5,000, 10,000 ibis or pelicans all flying in one spot, sometimes 100,000. There was more of everything. There was more wildlife everywhere. It was kind of normal. Apparently in the last 30, 40 years, 94% of all the bird life in the British Isles has disappeared. Not any one species, all of them. All the common stuff as well. It's a worry, because when the broadacre agro cult of harvest everythingism comes unglued, there isn't any wild reserves to fall back on. If you've got no environmental surplus, you can't have any economic activity, because economic activity consists of finding a pre-existing environmental surplus, over-harvesting it, shipping the accumulated excess to the market in order to generate a profit. That's what economic activity consists of doing, bringing environmental surpluses to the market. Well, all the environmental surpluses have been used up. Around about 2009, got to the point where oil was $150, $180 a barrel. Nobody could figure out any way to make any more money by burning any more oil or coal. I had the global financial crisis and oil dropped to about $30 a barrel. Fluctuates up and down. For a while there, owing to futures contracts and storage containers, oil was negatively priced. They'd pay you to take it away. People bought disused oil tankers, marine ones, and just filled them up with crude oil. Run them in figure eights, waited for the price of oil to climb up again, and then go and sell it back to the people who paid them to take it away. Interest rates worldwide are very close to zero, because nobody can think of any way to make any more money by borrowing any money, to spend any more money, to invest it in any sort of a money-making scheme. So that was what everything was like before SARS Corona 2 came out of the horseshoe bats and into the Wuhan meat markets, wet markets, whatever they call them. And the most recent learned article I read on the topic it was suggesting that the Wuhan market, the meat market, wet market, bush market, that was probably not where the actual viral mutation occurred. The mutation probably occurred several months earlier in the surrounding area, like within hundreds of kilometres, sort of thing. Probably, my guess here, probably among the people who actually catch the bats. Just, you know, that's who I would think has the greatest exposure to the greatest number of stressed, sick, harassed bats that might have a really high viral sidetrack. That's a Trachymoon incisor, wild native parsnip. That is either a bandicoot or it's a European hare. I haven't ever seen a bandicoot around here, but I have seen a European hare. It's sort of like a rabbit, only about 2.5 times the size. And apparently, feral European hares, they like eating wild native parsnip. If I had a firearms licence, that would probably be eminently sufficient reason for me to try and shoot the bloody thing and leave its skin hanging on a fence as a warning to the rest of its family. But haven't got a shooter's licence, and this is really stupid country for trying to hunt rabbits and hares with a bow and arrow. So I just have to put up with the fact that it exists. It exists. And maybe the rabbit Calasi virus might perhaps take it out. Spider. Spider, spider. As I said, the spiders, they are returning. And I think it's lovely. It was so bad when you'd go for a walk and you wouldn't see any spider webs. And spider webs are great because spider webs catch mosquitoes and midges and mites and sandflies and stuff. And that means you don't get bitten in the middle of the night. You don't get the mosquito flying around over your head because it's attracted by the reflection or the light point on the inside of the window caused by the solar powered lights that are outside the hut. So if you're inside the hut at night and you're a mosquito, you get attracted over to the window. And if somebody's clever enough to leave the cobwebs in the corners of the window, another bloody wild native parsnip lost to the hare. If you leave the cobwebs thickly clustered around the window, and when the mosquito goes over to investigate the bright white light point because it's trying its astral navigation and it didn't ever evolve to compensate for the fact that humans have artificial lights at night, it runs into the spider web. And the spider gets to eat a mosquito, and the person who tries to live in harmony with the ecology and the wildlife, they get to have a good night's sleep. It's a really neat system. Truly. All the people who worry about spiders and boo-hoo and sob-sob, just remember, spiders do not eat people. Not many people eat spiders, but a bunch of people treat them badly and jump on them and stomp on them and don't pay attention to them being there. And spiders have, a lot of them, got very savage defences against people who don't respect them. You don't have to like them or hang out with them too much, just let them live. They won't hurt you, as long as you don't hurt them. Poke them and prod them and annoy them. Some of them can kill you. Just like snakes. Snakes do not eat people. Some people eat snakes. If you make sure you don't tread on snakes, you're generally never going to have a problem with snakes. Once again, it's not rocket science. It's not rocket science. Everything in its place, a place for everything. The more life occupies a space, the more life can occupy the space. So, Stop buggerising around with broadacre agriculture, trying to bulldoze the existing ecology to introduce a single artificial plant, either for harvest and export as a crop or as a food species for a single artificial animal, which has been line bred for hundreds of generations, to be no good at existing unless it is protected from predators, parasites, competitors and disease. All you do is create deserts. Been creating deserts for 12,300 years by broadacre agriculture. I think shortly, as the global international trading economy of the global vile age winds down, spirals down, slows down, shrinks, contracts, we're going to have to learn how to live on what grows wild again, because the supermarket is going to stop providing stuff able to be purchased on digital plastic money that takes electricity in the grid in order to register anything, being resupplied every 24 hours by trucks that run on diesel. Especially here in Australia, in a country that's got pretty much no oil refineries and has no national emergency reserve storage space to hold refined transport fuel. Golly gosh. Step one, give your land 30 years fallow time before you ever try to start to have to live off it. 52 centimetres. And 45 centimetres. Still trickling in, and owing to the airlock principle, still trickling out as well. So I'll just let this bottom buoy wall fill up, maybe another 500 litres, before switching the siphon off, and then we'll store what comes in the 1 or 2 tonnes worth of spare space we've got in the number 1 buoy wall. Bit over 2 hours. Maybe a bit less than 2 hours.
What kind of home did they...
Well, it's flexible, it's not coming off, it's not detaching. Yeah, some of that. Well, I kind of expected there would be some abrasion there. As long as this plastic poo stays attached on the defects, then I will count it a success. Oh, that's a bit of a worry. I might have to cut that. Well, that might cure a few things, perhaps. Let's just say it didn't entirely all adhere, but it hasn't fallen off in great big disappointing chunks either. So far so good. And now the ankle complains about having been taken for a walk.
They can also get an idea about whether or not their aging of the moon is right. And if that's the case, then this gives you even more information to look at other bodies in, not just in our solar system, but beyond our solar system. Now, looking back on
well, the repair has not fallen off, but it is fraying somewhat around the edges where it gets a bit thin. Might have to trim that.
really able to get to Mars. Now, we have got some missions going to Mars at the moment. They're going to land next year. Really, really interesting. The other thing, of course, is that we're starting to see private companies
And it's raining again.
So we have earlier this year, we had
Lightly.
the launch of SpaceX, taking the first level astronaut up to the International Space Station.
Not from the entire sky, which features a rainbow. And if you look carefully, there's a double bow as well. Only just visible, but it's there. Ah, yes. Backlit raindrops through the forest. So I'm probably not going to do a whole lot more walking today. But we've got 6 hours or so of observation. Unless something falls off in the interim, we'll come back to this in about a week perhaps. As the water continues to flow down the hill from boy wall to boy wall. Sun shower at sunset. Warbles on a lot to YouTube. Ciao.